Are you ready to speak your truth and live in alignment with your highest potential? Welcome to Fifth Dimensional Leadership, a podcast for leaders, thinkers, and future makers dedicated to creating the conscious workplace of tomorrow. I'm your host, Jenny Clark. Join me and my guests as we move beyond action and doing to the essential truths, knowing and being. Whether you're an accomplished executive like me or a leader in training, we invite you to listen, learn, and grow with us. Welcome to Fifth Dimensional Leadership. Today, I'm loving this video format. We have an amazing CEO of a company many of you are going to know. His name is Patrick Spence. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, I'm thrilled that you're here because I've had the privilege of being around you and your organization for a little bit, and I know what kind of a CEO you are. But let me just give a little bit of background for the benefit of our listeners and viewers. Sonos. Many of you have heard of Sonos. It's a sound experience company. That might not be what's on your 10K or whatever, but that's what I'm going to call it. And they were founded by a small group of entrepreneurs determined to capitalize on emerging technologies and create a revolution in home sound systems. And they created this billion-dollar brand. I've got some in my house. And at the helm is Patrick Spence, and he's been with the company since 2012 and has been the CEO since 2017. Now, prior to joining Sonos, Patrick worked for 14 years at BlackBerry. Anybody remember those? I bet there's a whole cohort of people that don't even remember those, right? These Gen Zers. But Patrick did all kinds of things when he was at BlackBerry. He oversaw growth across North America, Asia Pac, Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And after progressing through the ranks, his career with the company culminated in the position of EVP of Sales and Marketing. So this guy is a pro. He's just a really elegant and sophisticated leader that I am thrilled to know. And so, Patrick, again, a big welcome to Fifth Dimensional Leadership.
Thank you, Jenny. And that was an amazing welcome. And now in this conversation, I'll try to live up to the high expectation you've set for everyone.
Oh, I don't think you're going to have to try. I think this is just going to be easy. So I always like to kick off. We have a lot of younger listeners sometimes who might aspire to be a CEO or just want to know how folks like you got their start. So walk us through some of the history, including a point at which you might have known that you wanted to be and had the makings of a leader.
Well, I'll try to keep it short, but I actually would go back to very early days in even elementary school projects, early team sports as well. And I think really there you start to learn how to get along with other people, different personalities in the mix, try to come together to achieve something. And I really felt just in those situations, and as I've reflected on it throughout the rest of my career, that I wanted to take the lead. It just felt like the right thing, to keep us moving and to be successful and to achieve something. And so I really think it was those early days, and I played a lot of team sports all the way through high school and into college. And I brought a lot of that, and I realized what I use a lot every day are the lessons learned from all of those experiences, as much as anything I've learned in school. And so that for me was really where it all began.
Nice. That's great. I studied linguistics. I'm always reminding people of that. And when I met you, I heard a little something in your voice. You're from Canada. There's a really positive stereotype about Canadians. And is it true? It's that you're nice.
Well, I think I'm probably a poor judge of that, but I do think there is that stereotype. And I do think it's been interesting for me having grown up inside a company that was Canadian, right? So the company behind BlackBerry RIM was based in Canada. I was so proud to join a company before even BlackBerry was invented, just start up at that point and work inside a company that Canadian brand, globally. And I think we get a lot of benefit and mileage from the reputation of being kind and fair, and so it is. I hope the stereotype, is true to some degree. I hope we can keep that up in today's polarized world as well. It's not perfect as a country. We've had our issues with residential school systems and some of the things that we've needed to grapple with as a country and are trying to grapple with. But certainly, I'm very proud to have grown up in Canada. It also gave me the education that I was able to receive that I may not have been able to afford, and my parents may not have been able to afford in the United States. And living here now and seeing the education system and some of those things. And I also grew up in a very diverse community. So a lot of different countries represented, a lot of different races. And there's something in the melting pot that is Canada that is special in terms of the way that we interact with one another and what it means to be Canadian. So I'm very proud, as you can probably tell, and you will pick up on a few words, maybe about, house,
That's right.
that are a dead giveaway. So.
I love it. I worked for a Canadian company for a couple of years, and the stereotype was true. It was some really fabulous people. So good on you, as I think Canadians like to say, right? So you talked about team sports and how that influenced a lot of how you operate and some of the values that you have. But there's something more when it comes to being a CEO. And was there ever sort of a defining moment for you when you knew that you had this superpower that some of your other peers and colleagues didn't necessarily have?
I think I was always careful to reflect on where I had gaps and be very self-aware around those things. And so I had a feeling that I had the ability to lead teams and I could do these things. And as I had an opportunity to get closer and closer, to the sun and work very closely. And in the early days, I did work closely with the co-CEOs. We had a different type of arrangement at BlackBerry, and then working closely with John, the founder of Sonos. I definitely began to see that it was something I felt that I was interested in and I could really help a company. And there were, there are always things that you see, the pros and cons of other leaders and looking at those things. And so I did have that feeling, probably a few years into my experience with BlackBerry. And I started, I was probably 4 years in when I started our Asia Pacific region and really started that from scratch. And so that gave me a taste of really having to put together the team and lead it and really from nothing. And so going through and being able to do that gave me a lot of confidence that this was something that I could do, leadership in general. And then I actually think with CEO, some of it is timing, right? Being in the right place at the right time, because there's only so many opportunities out there. And so, but yeah, I would say pretty early on, I felt I had an ability to lead, and I feel very fortunate that I've been able to be in a position where I could take on leadership of an entire company and one as amazing as Sonos.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you just mentioned having responsibility for Asia Pac. Did you live abroad at some point in your career?
Yes, I think that's a critical thing for people in this day and age. So just 2 weeks after I got married, and this will show you, how incredible my wife is. We moved from Canada to Australia, in fact. And so I knew I would be traveling all over Asia. And so I'd actually had a conversation with my wife and said, where do you want to live? Because I'm going to be on a plane. And right. So
in an approximate time zone, right? Was that
it? Exactly. So, she decided we would live in Australia, which was an amazing experience living there. But I was on a plane, 3 of the 4 weeks every single month, traveling all over the region, an incredible experience. And really just getting to see a lot of different cultures, meet a lot of people, and also understand that we're much more similar as people than we are different. Everybody's out there trying to, do their job really well, trying to oftentimes raise a family, pursue some passions. And it's pretty simple when you boil it down to it. And sometimes we let a lot of rhetoric and different things get in our way, or stereotypes or preconceived notions. But it was amazing to see that. And I hadn't really been outside of Canada for the most part. I'd done a little bit of business in the United States, but to that point, I hadn't really been outside. So it was an incredible experience. And the funniest thing is when we went back to Canada after 2 years there, is we were back in Canada for about 6 years and I was leading our North America team, is my wife and I had a conversation to say, hey, if we had another opportunity to go abroad, that would be great. Like, it would be really fun. And I kid you not, it was a week later, our co-CEOs asked me if I would go and lead our Europe, Middle East, Africa region. And so it was incredible timing in terms of that. So then we went and we lived in England for 2 years and looked after Europe, Middle East, Africa. And again, just an incredible, totally different situation. I inherited a team with close to 2,000 people and had to really bring them together. We'd had a lot of issues in our EMEA region. We'd never been successful. And so taking that over and really turning it around was a huge challenge, but one of the most rewarding things of my career, for sure.
Yeah. Wow. So that sounds like, for those aspiring leaders, a couple things. One, get as much local, on the ground, worldwide experience as possible, right?
Yes.
And be ready to deal with the messy stuff and make something good happen from it. And don't be afraid to fail, I think might be the other one.
That's a great point. I think I was very scared. Well, I should go back to that time. You're right. I just married, not really been outside the country much. And here we were, moving halfway around the world. And I was starting up in these countries. I didn't know the language, didn't know how we would hire people. But you put yourself out there. There's a lot of help from, the company back in Canada as well that I was able to get, and I could rely on a lot of people, and then a lot of great partners that we made in the countries we were doing business as well. And, really leaning on them to learn. And I think being humble about the fact you are learning and then build from there. But make no mistake, both times it came with a lot of kind of trepidation in terms of what are we getting ourselves into. And there's some moments there, right, where when you get outside the honeymoon, where you're like, what have we done, right, in terms of being halfway around the world. But I really think it's one of those things that helps push and grow you as a person and as a leader.
Yeah, for sure. I want to pivot a little bit. You might recall that one of the 5 dimensions that I talk about is speaking your truth. And I would love to know, because as I said, I've had the benefit of working with some of your team members, and I'd love to know, how do you foster an organizational culture that allows people to speak their truth?
So I think by being intentional about what we're trying to build. So I talk openly about the fact that we're trying to become the world's leading sound experience company. So that's the what. But I also talk about an ambition to be a company that is adaptable, admired, and enduring, where people can do great work and everyone feels welcome and included. So I hit that all the time, right? So those two things go hand in hand. And I think because of the experiences I've had, and having an amazing experience at BlackBerry, but one that did not end that well, I'm very focused on how do we create that kind of culture where people will be willing to speak their truth and bring those, tough issues to the fore, if you will. And I try to, I think it's a balance for me in the position that I'm in, because I want to inspire the organization and keep people positive in terms of the direction we're going. But I want to also acknowledge some of those difficult challenges that we have. And I try, and I've learned this over time. At first, I thought, being a leader and kind of watching other leaders meant, showing up tough and, no emotion and some of these things. And, through the difficult times of the pandemic, it was very emotional. And I shifted to doing a weekly all hands with our team. And there were some really emotional periods in there. We had to make some organizational changes, some tough times. And it was pretty emotional for all of us. I got emotional at times. And so I think trying to be vulnerable, as well, as cliche as that is, I think opens the door to others being willing to do that. And then the last thing I would say on it is how you respond, right, to those challenges and those things you wish you didn't have to hear, and how you deal with those kind of things is so critical, right? Because if you shoot the messenger, quote unquote, then you're sending a signal to the organization where no one else is going to want to raise those difficult issues. And so I try to be very mindful of embracing the issue itself, learning more about it, and encouraging others to be able to do that. But I'll tell you, it's tough. And I think I don't take it personally, because I recognize that it comes with the title, but it's intimidating. I just speaking to one of our people last week, she told me, how intimidated she was raising some of her concerns to me. And I do everything I can to create that environment where people can speak their truth, but it's still very difficult for people. And so trying to understand maybe that the role that you're in, as well, is a huge factor, and not to take it personally, right? This is not a personal thing. This is for us to try and make the organization better.
Yeah. Well, I personally think, having seen you in a forum with your team members, that you are a model, which seems to be the best way. It's one thing to say it and encourage people to do it. It's another thing to model that behavior, which it sounds like you've done throughout the pandemic, especially when people needed a greater level of empathy from senior leaders. Back to this intentional language, you have a few phrases that I've heard you mention that are really interesting to me, because words carry so much meaning. And so in this quest to encourage other people to speak their truth, you use some very specific words that aren't, in a couple different venues, that aren't normally used. Share those with us, if you don't mind.
Well, I think I actually think that when I talk about creating the culture we are, with the terms adaptable, enduring, and admired, those are different, right, than even many, many companies will. And so I keep going back to those themes. As we've thought about the future, and working through this pandemic, we've talked about intentional flexibility, really as an idea where we want our people to be able to be their best, right, and do their best work. And so what does that take? That takes something different for every one of us, right? And so what we've said to our teams is, think about how you're most effective. You know what working from home looks like. You know what working in the office looks like. You know best what the responsibilities of your job are. And so as you think about that, have a conversation with your manager and think about what that means, for you, for the company as well, for the team that you're on, and then make a decision on where do you think you're going to spend your time. I just believe it is, it is unrealistic for me to, put out a mandate and say everybody's going to work from home or work in the office 3 days a week or any of these things. It just doesn't work, right? We need to trust our people, and we hire amazing people. We are so blessed with an incredible team. They know the work that needs to be done. And so what does it take and what does that mean? But let's be intentional about it. And let's be even more intentional as we think about the future and think about the time we spend together, because it's more precious. And I think we've realized it's much more precious, right? So that when we come together, let's make really good use of that time and make sure we planned it out and these kind of things. And so we are pretty focused on the language that we use. We're very clear with the behaviors that we use and also measure people against internally. So we repeat those over and over, our experience principles, because language at the end of the day is all we have, right? And trying to land it. And I would say one of the things I've learned throughout this is that throughout my entire career is that you need to keep saying it, right? And you need to keep going back to the language and landing it, because you're never done trying to land the message that you're trying to land. We're never perfect as communicators in terms of trying to actually land that. And so repetition is an absolute key.
Yeah. I know it strikes me. I'm smirking a little bit because it strikes me that there's some irony in the sound business that you're in and repetition, and how that repetition actually plays on the psyche and people's minds and their thought patterns. So that makes a lot of sense. You also refer to an evolved culture. Tell us about that one and the meaning embedded in that.
Yeah, I think one of the dangerous things that we hear a lot about is culture fit, and this notion that people need to fit into a certain culture, right? And I think if you're doing that, then everybody's becoming the same, right? And you're not actually bringing the brilliance of every individual into the mix. And so what I say is that we should be evolving our culture with every individual that we're adding onto the team, right? They should be bringing something into the mix. They should be living by our behaviors. That's critical. Those are kind of the guideposts in terms of what we do. But they should be pushing us forward in a new way and evolving our culture. Because if you're not evolving, then your culture is becoming stale and something that isn't going to be able to adapt, right? And then that's not going to allow us to build an enduring company. So that notion of, are they really helping us evolve their culture as they come into the organization, is absolutely critical.
Yeah, I love that. That's the essence of inclusion versus assimilation.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
because
I'd like to think that one, Ginny, is very much, growing up in Canada, right? And the way that we approach immigration and people coming into the country, and, celebrating their experiences and customs and cultures from abroad. And then also, some of the things that they pick up inside Canada as well. And, I again, it'll sound more perfect than it is, but I think that is something that I witnessed, and I witnessed as effective in Canada, and I think should be brought more into the corporate world.
Yeah, I love that one. You guys were in the news fairly recently for having stood up to some of the big dogs in the tech industry. Can you talk a little bit about that? I don't want to be, tread on sensitive ground.
No, not sensitive at all. I mean, this is something I've been in this industry for 23 years. Back when I was at BlackBerry, Microsoft and Qualcomm tried to put together an initiative to really, compete and destroy BlackBerry. But when they did it, they created a company called Wireless Knowledge. There was still a notion of trying to create a product and make money, if you will, as you go through it. And things have changed. So even in that state, when you had really big, technology companies that were quite dominant, it's very different than it is today and the big tech domination we have, because you'll see companies like Google, in this case, that will come into a category, copy what one of the innovators is doing, and they're not looking to make money in it necessarily, but just continue to propagate the monopoly they already have, or dominant position in another area, like search in this case. And so you're dealing with a completely irrational, in a way, type of competition. And, we've been fortunate to be successful. We started 20 years ago, thankfully. So we had a good foundation, and we protected our intellectual property. And so, after raising the fact to Google and trying to work through this, because we do work with them on a variety of different things, we said, you should be licensing our intellectual property because you've copied our inventions, our innovation, fundamentally in what you've brought out in the smart speaker category. They brushed us off. And so ultimately had to take them to court. And that's what we've done. And I also had the opportunity to testify in front of Congress as well on competition and antitrust. And I think for those of us that are in a position that can do it, I think we have a responsibility to do it. I have a responsibility to do it for all of the inventors at Sonos and everybody working so hard to build what we've built today. And also for all of those entrepreneurs and innovators that are trying to build something today and need to make sure that it's a level playing field for the future, and that they're not going to simply be trampled by a monopoly company. And so at the end of the day, we did the math, and it was something that definitely was a big decision, conversation with the board, of course. And we've gone for it. And the good news is we've, definitely won the first round, and, won this battle. And we're looking forward to winning the whole war.
Well, and it sounds like you're a bit of a precedent in some of these matters against these big companies. Do you see other of your, maybe they're not competitors, but, similarly sized companies? You're a 1,400 person company right now, going up a company 10 times your size, at least in terms of employees, and far more in terms of revenues. So what do you think? Is this going to be sticky?
I think I've been very careful that I wanted to make sure this wasn't something that distracted us from innovating and really our core purpose, right, of delivering great sound experience. And so we have a very small, focused team of people that focus on this and making sure that they're dealing with Google's infringement of our intellectual property and other partners and those kind of things. And then the vast majority of the company is focused on, creating great new experiences and innovating and some of these things. And so I've been very thoughtful and intentional when it comes to how do we do this and how do we approach it. But certainly I feel like we've done the work, and we're in a position where we can take them on There's a lot of other players that simply cannot. And we hear from others outside, in the tech industry more broadly, that definitely are rallying behind what we're trying to do and hold Google accountable for infringing on our intellectual property and copying our inventions. And so that is something that there's certainly a lot more momentum you see today in terms of the way the Biden administration is putting together the FTC, the DOJ, the FCC as well. And I think this is about what's the right thing for us as citizens. As consumers, sometimes we can get lulled into the belief that, if it's cheaper or if it's free, it's great. And it is a bit in the moment. It's like having fast food. But as a citizen, and thinking about making sure we have employment for everyone and we have good paying jobs and we have a good society where there's lots of new companies starting up and innovation and some of these things, there's a job for government, for regulation to play a role to ensure that we don't end up with one or two giant companies that employ very few, make a couple of people very, very wealthy, right. And it doesn't end up that well for everybody else.
Yeah. Wow. I think I said 10 times. I should have said 100. I was off by a factor of 10. It's amazing to me that you've been able to accomplish so much with the company is relatively small in terms of headcount.
It is. And it's so interesting because most people will say, I didn't realize, you're that small. It was when we went public, people as well were like, wow, that's your revenue, because we were sub $1 billion or heading towards $1 billion at that point. Because I think we've had a big impact on a lot of people in culture, a lot of musicians, right, that have had Sonos as well and love Sonos. And so they talk about it. So you find Sonos in a lot of places. As you mentioned, the brand is so well regarded, and it's what makes us most proud. It's what keeps us going every day to just build, quality products and services that people are going to love, and setting those bar. And my email address is on our customer support website, and so I get emails, good, bad, and ugly. And the good ones I get are incredible. The fact that people will take time to write an email to me talking about how much they love their Sonos products is, I'm just so grateful and fortunate. And it shows you the power, if you do put your blood, sweat, and tears into it and create something great, it has a huge impact on people and can on the world. And there's nothing like it. That's why I feel so fortunate to have been a part of BlackBerry and the experience that delivered and the utility it delivered to a lot of people. And now, really the joy of Sonos and everything that it brings people, and being in music and tech is just the greatest.
Yeah, you're pretty fortunate in that regard. It's cool stuff, right? Yeah. But I guess I can't help but notice that so much of what you're talking about is, again, as a leader, you are modeling the behavior. You're keeping your ear to the ground, so to speak, and you're staying close to customers. You're staying close to your team members to ensure that that the product is good, that people are being heard. How is that sustainable? I guess that's the question.
That is a great question. I found I got to a really unsustainable place at RIM at one point at BlackBerry, just as things were, as we reached our most challenging times, and there wasn't a lot of communication. And so I was running a monthly all hands for the people in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and really a lot of people from around the globe. There were 2,000 people on that team. And I think on one of our monthlies, we had 7,000 people, because we did make the link available to other people internally, just because they wanted to hear and understand what was going on. And they wanted to, really, just the communication and vulnerability and some of those things. And at that point, I was handling probably 400-ish emails a day, trying to do all sorts of deals on my own. I had 19 people reporting to me. It was completely unsustainable. But I kind of at Ginny thought that was what a great leader looked like, is that you would do everything. And, and it was all about, I had to be involved in every big deal and do some of those things. And really, having, separating from BlackBerry and then coming to Sonos gave me a chance to reinvent myself. And I really credit John, the co-founder of Sonos, with helping me as well prioritize better and think about spending time thinking through some of these things, recognizing that getting the right people on the team. Today there's 9 people that report to me, and that's manageable, and I can have much deeper conversations with them and help them with what they're trying to achieve and work through. And so I feel I treat myself much better. I get up every morning and do exercise, and that sets me in a much better mindset for the day. So I feel like I've found a good rhythm now, but that's 23 years later after having worked through it. It's been a struggle, because I think you hear all these stories of people working 24/7, and that's what it takes, and those kind of things. But I realize now in hindsight that I was not helping myself or the company, right, by leading in that way. Mm-hmm. And so I found a much better rhythm where I can show up properly for everyone at Sonos, our customers, our people, and all our stakeholders. I found a good rhythm in terms of what's there. And every day I try to focus on what are the 3 things I need to do today to move the ball forward on our long-term objectives, right? And so I focus in 2 areas, strategy and culture. And so what are the 3 things today I'm going to actually do that help connect to what we're trying to do over the long term? And I try to stay as disciplined as possible on that. And then a lot of time in conversation with my team and with others, just supporting them and, trying to help them with whatever challenges they're facing.
Yeah. Well, some of that means delegating to them so that they have room to grow, right?
Yeah,
by being able to do some of these things that you probably did with somewhat, ease is maybe not the right word, but yeah. But you at least tried to take on.
That's right. Exactly. And I should have been, to your point, I should have been delegating more of that. So that was a lesson learned. And certainly today, you realize everyone benefits when you do. So
it's true. Yeah, we're not supposed to know all things and be all things to all people. Speaking of this trend of leadership, and what would you say if you had to name one characteristic? What do you think is the single most important characteristic of a leader? And I use the word characteristic intentionally because it can be a personal characteristic or a competency.
So you've mentioned it a few times, and so it's not a word necessarily, or you'll probably find the right word for it, but it is walking the talk, setting the example, I think is the most important thing for what you expect from people. And holding, I hold myself to the highest bar on all of the things for the organization when it comes to both what we achieve and the kind of work we do, and then as well how we do it and how we behave, right? And so I am, my own toughest critic in going through that. And I think people underestimate the fact that one, sentence or quip in a meeting or an email from the CEO carries so much weight. And so I'm just very mindful that everything I say and do has outsized impact. I would like to think it shouldn't. I see myself as a part of the team and we're all in it together, but it just comes with the territory in doing it. And so you have to hold yourself to that really, that higher level. But I am going to squeeze 2 other things in there if I can. One is the humility side of it. And I think my wife and our kids, they could care less what I do. And, they'll poke fun at me and bring me down to earth pretty easily. And I think my team as well, and most of the people at Sonos as well, will give it to me pretty well. And, they know I'm just a regular person trying to do a job. And then I think the other thing I would say that served me well is curiosity. And I just love to learn and figure out what's happening. And I try to read as much as I can and consume podcasts as much as I can and just be on the lookout for what's new, what's next, who's doing it better, and getting better over time. And so I would say those are 2 really important things that not only for me, and I think I've learned over time and kind of naturally had the curiosity side, but also as I've watched and gotten to know other CEOs and successful ones and kind of differentiating the successful ones from those that haven't been successful.
Yeah. So walking the talk, just to recap, humility and curiosity.
Yes.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I'm going to throw one out that I've been using lately that I think begins to capture a lot of those, or a couple of them at least, and that's integrity.
Yeah.
It's a word you don't hear that often. But I found something that was written for my father, and they referred to him as having integrity. And I thought, that's almost like right up there with the highest honor, right? Because it just captures so many good, positive characteristics. And it's not just about morality, but it's about being curious and being humble and caring for other people and showing up intentionally. And you do those things. So kudos to you.
Well, I think it's interesting that you would have that. I love the term. I think it was interesting. I immediately thought of my own father, and it's one of those things where it goes back to that saying of kind of doing the right thing when no one's watching, right? Yeah. And that to me is that feeling of integrity, and it is that walk the talk, right, as well, and just trying to hold yourself to a higher standard. I love it because that is a word I would love to have my name associated with.
Oh, well, from where I'm sitting, I will offer that as a descriptor of you.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm not long on platitudes, by the way. You haven't known me a long time, but you might have guessed that. Another question for you. Success. The company is having great success. You got a lot of runway in front of you. What does success look like for you personally, and then for Sonos?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for me personally, it's that, and it's embedded with the company, is that 50 years from now, Sonos is still here. It's relevant and it's growing. It's adapted to be whatever it needs to be as well. And so, whether I'm here for another year or another 10 years, I hope I've contributed to creating a company that can adapt, is admired, and can endure. And I'd love if there was only a way to figure out how to make that, work in today's world as well. I think ideally people would be compensated that way, and measured that way. And we would look back, because we see lots of stories where in the moment, whether it's WeWork or Theranos or any of these companies, it's like, wow, this is an amazing company. And there's, the emperor has no clothes. And so for me, and you can see it in my history, 14 years at one company, 9 at another, building something meaningful that is going to last for the long term, trying to figure out how to do that and have it last and thrive well past, myself and the people that are at Sonos today, is something that I think about every day and try to work on. And it's why I spend so much time on culture and trying to build the right culture for the future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Before we close, another question came to mind, that we're reading so much about the Great Resignation. Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious to know your take on that. You're in a hiring mode, but
we are.
But it's affecting the potential workforce, large swaths of our population. So what are your thoughts on what that's about? How do you, as someone who wants to hire, combat that? What are you thinking?
I think it's, I'm glad people are using, what was a tragic situation in this difficult pandemic to reflect on what's important to them, right? And I think we've seen people that have left the service industry and instead are getting different jobs that, maybe they feel more safe and have a higher, more stable wage. And so there can be a lot of good that happens. Hopefully we see people getting a higher wage, and we start to see changes in the way that we pay people more broadly as we think about the world. And so I think some of it is good. Yeah. And getting off the treadmill and stepping back, I think, is a great thing for people. I think it's something that I look at as an opportunity for us, really, because we offer a place where people have a purpose. We're building something special. We're trying to build a culture as well that's special and really be welcoming to everyone, trying to build a diverse and inclusive kind of company. And so this is a great time for us as people rethink all of those things. And certainly, I also think that we will certainly lose people during this period. And I think that's okay if they've found, what they want to do next. I I've seen companies where when people are leaving, it's like, they're betraying us or something like that. And
Yeah.
it couldn't be farther from the truth. We should be saying thank you for what you've contributed here at Sonos. And we wish you all the best, for your next company. And we want them to go do well. And hopefully we were part of that journey, right? And they helped us. We helped them with their next step in their career. And they'll be successful, and maybe they'll come back to Sonos, or maybe they'll help us in another way with a partnership or some of these things. And so I'm glad people are reflecting on what's important to them. Where do they want to work? And I think for companies that are thoughtful about the kind of culture and company they're building, they'll come out ahead as part of all of this.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think it's great. I think people are waking up and figuring out what aligns with them and what resonates with them on a much deeper personal level. It's not just the emperor has no clothes kind of thing, right? I think we've seen enough of that. These sort of false prophets out here.
Yes.
Before we leave, I always like to ask our guests if there's any one thing that you would like to leave with our audience that might be a word of wisdom or inspiration or even healing, especially during this time. It can be more than one word.
Yeah, I think I would hope that people, it's easy for me to say, but it's true, is that we're all just trying to figure it out. I do not have it figured out. I haven't met a CEO yet that has it figured out, even though they may project some of that feeling, publicly, if you will, but everybody's just trying to figure it out. And so I think it's important that we keep in mind that, we have no idea what everybody's going through, and we give people a break at the end of the day. I see a lot right now of tension out there in the country, in the world, simple things like traveling or going out for a meal, right? And the way that people are treating one another. And so, I think it's important that we just be patient with one another, understanding and recognize that we're all in it together.
Yeah. Indeed, we are. Well, Patrick Spence, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today. You are an inspiration. I wish you much, much, much continued success, and keep going after those big boys, right? Just keep them on their toes and let them know that you're coming for them.
You bet. Thanks, Jenny. I really enjoyed the conversation, and thank you for everything that you do as it goes towards leadership.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy Fifth Dimensional Leadership, subscribe, share, and leave a rating or review on your platform of choice. And don't forget to check us out at ginnyclarke.com. That's GINNYCLARKE.com. You can explore this and prior episodes, view tips and tricks, and sign up for special announcements. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks. And until then, remember, you're just that good. Special thanks to writer and collaborator Jackson Best, contributors Sadasia McCutcheon and Tianka Shepard, operations manager Kimberly Cupits, and production and editing Podfly Productions.